to our next fireside chat, which is on the decision making at scale with AI, the new playbook. Now, in the age of exponential technologies revolution, AI continues to dominate the business and technology landscape. Whilst the naysayers have advocated the doomsday for humanity by predicting the advent of singularity, AI for good, and all have several applications to usher a new change in how we make decisions at enterprise and personal spheres. Traditionally, human decisions are to a large extent based on intuition, gut, and historical data. And in the age of algorithm economy, several of our decisions will be taken by algorithms. Algorithms that are personalized, curated, and consumed for our own decision making. Leveraging AI, the ability to mimic the human brain and the ensuing ability to sense, comprehend, and act will significantly go up, and that will result in the emergence of decision making at scale and an emergence of new playbook at the enterprise level. This session coming up next brings together experts with multifarious background, and they will discuss and unravel aspects on AI taking over decision making and the ensuing impact at the enterprise level. Ladies and gentlemen, we welcome you to our next session, which is a fireside discussion on topic decision making at scale with AI, the new playbook. And doing this for us are these speakers. First up, Senior Director, Business Analytics, Investnet Yodlee. Well, she leads the business analytics capability at Investnet Yodlee, which includes the insights and analytics solution validation practices, focusing on delivering products and solutions in the domains of financial wellness and alternative data. With nearly 18 years of experience, she has worked in the past with Swiss Re, HP, and KPMG in global roles across consulting, strategy, and analytics. So give it up, ladies and gentlemen, for the Senior Director, Business Analytics, Investnet Yodlee, Smita Suryanarayanan. And the next speaker on our list is the SVP for Consumer Analytics, Wells Fargo. Now, he is a strong believer and practitioner of using advanced analytics as a strategic differentiator across domains and has a proven track record of creating impact by solving key business problems with astute analytical problem solving. Previously, he headed the analytics solutions and delivery for the group DNA cell of Aditya Birla Group. So please welcome the Senior Vice President, Consumer Analytics, Wells Fargo, Nitin Suri. And the next speaker is the Director, Microsoft India, who also happens to be the anchor for this episode. Put your hands together for her because she has a rich mix of business development, strategic planning, stakeholder management, program management, and operational excellence in a global delivery model. She has built high-performing, cross-functional, culturally diverse teams spread across over 3 continents. Now, she has an experience with engineering program management, business operations, vendor or subcontractor performance management, client relationships, business solutions, program planning and execution, and resource management. Well, that forms the crux of who she is as an anchor for us. Please welcome the Director, Microsoft India, Saujanya Shetty. Now, before I hand this over to the capable hands of Saujanya and the other 2 panelists that we have here, well, please note, panelists, you will have just about a few minutes before you wrap up and you will hear a sound which sounds something like this. Okay, so you will have to reconvene and finish up your and get together with the wrapping up so we can have that in the interest of time because we have 1,500 people across galleries watching us live right now. Over to you, Saujanya.
Thank you so much, Riaz, and a good afternoon, good evening to everybody who's logged in. I see it's a little dark in the background, but my apologies. I tried to fix the lighting over here. So I'll start off with automated decision systems, which uses analysis for assessing either the eligibility of somebody or an organization or a product for a benefit or penalty has been traditionally been used in multiple industries, whether it is credit, in the credit decisions in the banking sector, whether it is the employment screening, the insurance eligibility in the digital marketing, CRM space, and also in healthcare and multiple other sectors. We have also seen it in the public space, not so much as in India, but like even for justice sentencing, it's been used as a process itself, as a analysis. So it's a very interesting space, the decision analytics part of it, and I'm privileged to actually host this session. So I'll start off with Nitin and Smita. The first part that we will get into is what do we mean by decision making at scale? Because AI works at scale. So, Smita, if you can throw some insight first on from an organization or a sector perspective, what are some examples you can give of decision at scale?
Sure. I think scale means a lot of things to a lot of people depending on where they're coming from, right? For a long time, scale meant you're working with a lot of data to make some decisions, but more often now it tends to mean that you're solving a problem across many users or a lot of instances, right? It can also mean that you're making decisions in a split second for a segment of one. I think the segment of one concept is something that's caught up a lot. And while it's interesting to say it's actually a segment of one, but we're talking about it at scale, that's the whole point, because you have to build something that supports many diverse use cases, but you're still able to make a split second decision. Now, decisions could be very simple. I mean, we see this every day in our lives, and I think some of the earlier panel discussions alluded to this as well. It could be around what content do I recommend when somebody is watching my streaming service. It could be, do I pre-qualify this person for a loan? Right? A lot of us get those instantaneous loan offers. Most of that is actually automated decision making. Do I sanction loans for this person if somebody's applied? What offers do I send to XYZ person? These are all decisions that have to be made at scale, simply because it has to happen across millions of customers or users and literally split second decisions at any point of time. Right? So that's I think the most relevant example of decision at scale that I can think of today.
Nitin, let me ask this in a contradicting way with you. While we've talked about decision at scale, from an individual perspective, we make decisions. Our mind and our system makes decisions day in, day out, every hour, every second. What does it mean from a decision at scale perspective if you put an individual into the picture?
Sajana, let's just to make sure that I understand it clearly. You're saying how we perceive AI making decisions at scale for us, and how we consume it, and how we perceive it.
That
Is
is
that what
correct.
you're?
That is correct. That is
Yeah,
correct.
I think to my mind, most decisions where AI gets into this decision making at scale for us, we're very comfortable when we don't see it making decisions for us. So as it is more apparent, and we probably have the feeling of control, or I would say illusion of control. We feel that we are the ones who are making the decisions. But the moment, and we want to stay in control. We want to understand how AI or any other recommender system is making that decision. The moment it sort of goes into the background and is wrapped in a layer which is easy and intuitive, and is very human centered, and takes care of my needs at that point of time, and there could be a very complicated decision making that is going on behind the scenes, which I have no idea about what's happening. I'm very comfortable. I think there are so many decisions which right now we're just getting more and more comfortable with AI taking. Let's talk about robo advisory, right? People keep their financial independence at a very high priority. I mean, everybody wants to sort of have control of their finances, want to have their money grow. And until now, the decisions have been more individual driven. You had very uh, advanced investment advisors and people who really understand the market, can predict the market. Whoever thinks they can do it, I think that they're fooling themselves and others as well. But still, I think you trust a lot of those decisions to experts. And right now there is robo advisory coming in, where even spot decisions and multitude of those decisions that need to happen. And if I'm, as a consumer, told that there is a machine behind the scenes which is making those decisions for me, I don't know how much of a comfort I would have, or it's a very complicated model which nobody can explain to me, because I have the desire to sort of understand how the decision is being made. And if it is a little bit more hidden, a little bit more non-apparent, I get very comfortable. Similar, I think Tesla. People are going gaga about it, right? If somebody were to jump into a Tesla car for the first time, and after having driven for many years, it's going to be very uncomfortable, because you would want to take control. You would want to grab that steering wheel and sort of start driving. But over time, you get a little bit more comfortable with machine driving for yourself. Although many of us in India haven't even experienced that, but whatever you see from the videos and all, is people do go through that comfort factor, or getting comfortable with the AI taking over. And I think that really is, to my point, to my mind, a very crucial factor of decision making is to, as humans, as individuals, ability to seemingly lose control and let the decision making be taken over by AI.
Now, that's a interesting perspective as well, right? So all these scenarios we've seen so far, whether it is what Smita was talking about or what you're talking about as examples, we've seen it as the positive scenarios. Whereas when you look at decision making, there are other aspects. In the previous conversation, we heard of biases. There's also this aspect of how much of this data is actually authentic enough to cover a larger mass itself. Also, to the transparency aspect that you just talked about. How do I trust the decision making process or the algorithm itself? So, if I sort of put on a future state as a question now, Nitin, the first question would be to you. There clearly seems to be certain areas where we potentially can apply AI, and there are certain areas we should not even be thinking of. Can you sort of talk about, in your perspective, what's the future state like? What are things where we can venture into with decision making or decision led AI, and where are things we basically draw a line?
Again, I think I'll refer to what was Sudhir who said, or I think Vinay who said, ethical part of it is very, very personal, because law and ethics are very, very different, and it's the interpretation of law sometimes which becomes ethical decision or not. But that being apart, I think if anybody thinks, and I heard. I'm forgetting her name, and I clearly know her, so it's no reason for me to forget her name. The Michelle and Ambika. I think Ambika did speak about how the human intelligence, and a lot of development grew very, very slowly and then very suddenly. I think AI is pretty much on the same track. It's the same exponential curve that you've seen, right? And if any one of us think that a few years from now we can predict what future is going to be, we are fooling ourselves. There is no one which really can, with a lot of confidence, predict how it's going to be. My personal belief is AI literally is going to become so pervasive that we wouldn't even be able to think about it and differentiate and even give it any thought on what it is doing for us. So that's really the future. In terms of where we should allow or not is, again, I think we can probably put those parameters right now basis our collective societal understanding of what are good use cases, what are not so good use cases. But I think that debate is also heating up, and there is no clear answer. There is no clear side that you can take about AI getting into CRISPR technology to make designer babies, right? Is it ethical or not? Do we want to do it or not? But the research is happening. The ingredients are getting ready, and sometimes soon the recipe is going to come out. To my mind, I think it's more like, at a given point of time, whatever collective definition of the right usage of AI is what will drive some of its use cases. But whatever we can try and not try, regulations, ethics, and all, to my mind, again, my personal point of view, I don't know how many will subscribe it or not, there always will exist a dark side. And there always will be use cases where these technologies, which are very, very advanced, are always going to be used. And I think that predominantly is because of the perverse utility functions that humans have, which is their own personal gain to be maximized. And I think as long as that continues, unless that basic human nature changes, there is going to be use cases that AI or any other technology will find, believe it or not.
Do you see us as individuals then having the right of way or the decision making to choose using something like this versus not choosing? Or
you mean the red pill? You mean the red pill or the blue pill?
Yeah.
I don't know. I honestly have, there is a cautious optimism. That's the school I fall in, where I feel it's going to really be a hugely beneficial thing because we are using it, we are training it, we are creating solutions which are going to make our life more efficient, more convenient, and more fast in many ways. And as long as we keep doing that and we're comfortable with that, I think there will be a point where, to a certain point of time, we'll probably not have a lot of control. But we have to just get comfortable with that. We have to all become comfortable at a certain point of time, not fooling ourselves and our own hubris of thinking that we know better and we can do better than machines, even in amassing, absorbing all the information and then taking those decisions. AI will always be able to do a better job of it.
I agree with you completely here. Smita, the question for you is, another part of it is transparency, right? Oftentimes we don't know the algorithm in the back end that is actually making these decisions. We don't know the kind of data that is being used. A lot of aspects sort of come into this whole thing. As a future state, where does explainability of all this come in to create transparency and to create that trust in the decision AI process?
Yeah, so I think again, it's transparency is something that we talk about. Explainability was of AI was the topic of the year. I think in 2019 continues to be the topic of the year. It'll continue to be the topic until somebody figures out how do you actually make it work. To be fair, for every algorithm and every model that somebody says, okay, this is being powered by XYZ sort of thing in the background, there are probably thousands more running or being released every day, which we have no clue about.
No idea.
So this is going to be, and as Nitin was also saying, he's very cautiously optimistic. I'm not actually. I'm probably the other extreme. I'm thinking, a lot of this is we come from a position of privilege, right? We tend to question things. We have the ability to comprehend things. But if you think of things at scale, especially in the future, you don't even know what's happening, right? And I'm not talking about this in terms of creating fear or anything like that. It's actually you look at the population that is impacted by any algorithm or any decision making tool that is being used at scale, right? It's not targeted at people like us. It's actually a wider population which probably has no comprehension of the fact that there is actually some decision being made on them. Right? So explainability from a corporate standard perspective is good, it's needed. But the other side of explainability is, are people receptive to it? Are they going to be able to understand it even if you explain it? Right? This goes back to a very, very old age problem of terms and conditions. I always look at it as, all of us sign up to terms and conditions. How many of us ever read the small print? Even we don't, right? It's the same thing. So, but I think from a practice perspective, this is something that is important to bake into the process of building out models. It's super important. As corporate citizens, right? We owe it to ourselves to create processes and create frameworks where we are actually building an explainability as part of the development process. I think that is something. This is something that governments can mandate. I don't know, but at the end of the day, it will come down to the way you implement it we implement it in each of our organizations. And there's a practical issue also with explainability, right? You need to have explainable models because these models stand alone regardless of people. And at some point of time, these models have to evolve and learn, and the people who built it may not be there. So you need to have very, very robust. There's a practical benefit for corporates to invest in this, actually. Right, so I would say that is going to happen. I think we see this happen. Gone are the days of the black box thing. There are a lot of questions. There are more qualified people also questioning it on every side. I mean, especially in things like let's take a very simple one: credit lending. I think that was there in the Netflix, well, not the Netflix documentary. There are multiple documentaries on this topic that have been made. Right, how you profile. There are fair lending rules across the world, but if there's a black box algorithm making the decision, how do you even know whether it's actually profiling the customer based on race, right? Unless somebody is actually going to build a model, explain it out, and in a way that the person who's actually evaluating it neutrally is able to understand it. And I think these are things that we are learning, and this will become extremely important. Otherwise, who do you blame when a decision goes wrong?
Yeah.
So absolutely, I'm not saying that explainability is not important, but I think more important is really creating good quality data on which these good models and very, very complex models can get trained on. If you feed a superlatively high quality machine with bad fuel, it is going to go bad, right? And then you cannot blame the machine; you have to blame the fuel. And I think most of the watershed moments where even AI has had a leapfrog jump in what they were able to do, what it was able to do, was where we had a whole lot of effort going in creating some very good data, whether it was computer vision or text or NLP, unless those data sources were made available and made public, a lot of this development wouldn't have happened. And I think if you're talking about creating these decisions, right now the decision is mimicking what people have done. That's where we are saying, we know better than how a machine machines will be able to make the decision because we have made those decisions in the past. Maybe we are only just going to aggravate those biases. So we have to really use AI or machine learning or whichever way. And there are tools available which are going to do this exploration, exploitation, synthetic data generation and GAN and whatnot, where there is going to be more effort given to creating unseen data, unseen scenarios, which then the machines can feed themselves on and quench their thirst to figure out something better. So that's how I think we probably will be able to get comfortable. Explainability or not, I think is always a thing, because how far can you really start understanding the next level and the next level and the next level? There is, to my mind, a bit of a layer that you will reach beyond which it's probably going to be very, very difficult, because especially the way these very heavy, deep architected models really work, it just becomes a very messy affair within itself.
Do you see the human interaction in this process actually being one of the ways of resolving this? Like, for example, as I go through a product or a UX or UI product UI, am I allowed to say, okay, I'm at a decision point and here's path A, path B that you have? Do you see that becoming one of the possible ways of going ahead with it?
It can be, but I think that's where I always find it very difficult to distinguish. Are we reinforcing what we already have as our beliefs? Because there is this thought of, humans don't know what they need. Unless you give them something else, they will probably latch onto it, right? And if you just keep checking with me what I know, my response to that is going to be based on my prior experiences. So how do I sort of, even understand whether it's going to be a better thing or not? So I think there is a fine line between what we let humans decide, because if we completely go with that, then we are not going to move away from this strata of where we are right now stuck and go to the next level. If we have to, then we have to have the AI or machine learning or the other more advanced technology to create that differentiator and then try it out and explore it and exploit it.
Makes sense. I want to take cue from what Smita talked about as fear, right? We've talked about what are some of the drivers in our conversation, but I want to dwell a little more on what are these drivers and inhibitors. You guys want to take a stab at it one by one? Nitin, I'll go with you first.
Okay, let's go. So the fears, I think I probably was talking about those when I was talking about really as enablers or the derailers. And to my mind, derailers are really lack of understanding and lack of feeling of control. Even in enterprise settings, I think and we've all been there, right? We've made some very fantastic models which are really, very accurate, but when you take it to the decision makers, they don't feel comfortable using it, because sometimes it doesn't necessarily reinstate what they already think they know. But what they know, is that really the correct thing or not, is a question mark, right? And hence, the feeling of being in control, being a better decision maker, being a better outcome driven person than the machine or than what the data is telling us, sometimes, to my mind, is the biggest fear. And I think that behavior really manifests itself in we not getting comfortable in really letting AI decide and execute and take decision making at scale. The other is, I think somebody touched it in the past, in the last session, was not knowing how we're using these tools for. And, if we have a lot of what I call package data scientists who don't really understand what's really going on even within those algorithms, and using them without the proper knowledge can be really, really disastrous. So I think that's the other fear I have personally, of how this can really go into a very downhill slope rather than the virtuous slope that it leads to.
Thank you, Nitin. Smita, you want to go next?
So I think from a fear perspective, I think Nitin covered quite a bit of it, right? Fear of the unknown is always fear. What was feared 10 years ago is no longer feared today. And it's a classic example that I like to give is, if 10 years ago, 15 years ago, somebody told me that I could rely on a computer program to rebalance my portfolio, I would have been like, what are you talking about? Right? And now that's no longer the thing. I mean, it's an accepted thing. People sign up, we flock to sign up to some of these platforms, right? Things change. The other thing I think from a driver perspective is also knowing what is that decision that you want to make, and what is that end outcome that you want to go towards. So there's a very nice Gartner study that I was referencing earlier today. Was they talk about 3 degrees of decision support, right, or decision making. One is where you're using it for decision support, classic, right? We've all done that in the past. And there's something we talk about called decision augmentation, which is where what you talked about, Sarjanya, the fourth concept, right?
Yeah,
I
yeah,
haven't, but it's just a recommendation that a program is making to me, right?
true.
And then there is decision automation. Now, when the disaster strikes, when you try to, automate something where you should be augmenting it,
Mm.
and that is a trait that is actually, and there's nothing to say that something that is augmented today cannot be automated tomorrow. But you need to be at the right life cycle. You need to be timing is very important.
Yeah.
You automate something with insufficient information, things go, right? You make wrong decisions, all of that happens. So I think that part is going to be super important as well. So I think that's one of the key drivers is knowing clarity of thought would actually drive very good systems that help decision making using AI.
So my last question, I think we still have some time. I see Riaz is there. I'm going to go ahead with my last question. Is we do have quite a lot of practitioners here. Any advice for practitioners on how to be cognitive of these, both the inhibitors as well as the drivers, when they are designing solutions and how they use these models and the analysis of the insights they provide out of that? I'll start with you, Smita.
Sure. I think straightforward is you know what you're going after, right? And establish success criteria upfront. If you're in a lab model, success criteria may not be the thing we are going after, but if you're solving a real world problem, that's important. And start your exploration with all competencies involved, because you could identify a data science method that solves for the problem, but that may not be efficient when you're actually going to operationalize it. So it's important to have all the people on the table when you're designing or exploring a problem and the solution. So have your data scientists, have your domain analysts, have your engineering folks there. And the final thing I'd say is the best laid plans of mice and men off go wrong, right? At the end of the day. So you may do the best testing, you may validate everything to high heaven, but have your backup plan in case things fail, right? How quickly do you roll back any system that you rolled out? That we've burnt and learned. So I think that's something I would say keep in mind.
That's a brilliant one. I think what I've also seen is I saw one session recently where even in research, when you're doing your research, it's very important to visualize the good and the bad. How bad? What are the worst use cases of this when you're designing something, when you're researching something? I think it's very important to sort of don both hats. It's sort of difficult for some people to put both hats, but I think how is the destructive ability of it also needs to be researched when you're doing the analysis. Nitin, your take on this?
I would say, focus on really understanding and know your trade and be the expert of what you're using and how you're using and what you're using it for. Try to explain it. I think there's this fantastic YouTube series that you find where you explain the same concept to a 5-year-old, to a college graduate, to a PhD student. Try to do that as much as possible. And the moment you're able to do that, explain it to high school grad or even younger, you can use it very well. The third and last thing that I would say is, don't be Walter White. I mean, you have the same technology available. I'm making reference to Breaking Bad. Don't be the one who for your things, because if you understand things very, very well, you know that you have the power to use it for good versus bad. The choice is going to be yours. And if you really are going to build careers, and more than us, I think this generation is going to really be driving where the AI and how it's going to land and going to be used. There's a lot that depends on how that is going to come about, by how it's going to be used. And many of the people are going to be here who are going to be inventors and disruptors. So I hope that you use it for good.
Thank you. Riaz, how much more time do I have? All right. So in that case, I think the intent of this conversation was, let's see if we can quickly summarize. First one was to really identify what is decision making, what are these decision making systems, how are we using it today, to really give a perspective around that. What we see as potential future state for the decision making AI, and also what are some of the inhibitors as well as drivers for these game-changing solutions that reach us. I hope these are key insights that folks who've tuned in to have taken away. And thank you so much, Nitin and Smita, for this wonderful conversation.
Thank you. Happy
Sure.
Friday. Happy weekend.
Thank you.
And
You too.
I must thank this really amazing fireside chat. Okay, all of you all together, fantastic energy and fantastic insights. Okay, so thank you, Nitin, Smita, and Saujanya, of course, for chaperoning this entire thing for all of us here. So please have a beautiful weekend, guys. All right. So
Thank
that,
you.
ladies and gentlemen, right after this, we're going to move on to a next session. You don't have to go nowhere. Stick where you are. I'm going to request the console to switch us over, and we'll be back in 15 seconds. Console, can we switch over to the next session, please?